top stories, including the public hearing that was held at the University of Houston on Saturday, where hundreds of residents gathered to protest plans to redraw congressional maps. I'm Ernie Manous.
And I'm Celeste Diaz-Sherman. We'll also talk with Nicole Nosek, the founder and chair of Texans for Reasonable Solutions, who'll discuss how her organization is pushing for policies that make it easier to build affordable homes.
And I'm Frank Billingsley. Plus, we'll also speak with John Rumpler, Clean Water Director and Senior Attorney at Environment Texas. He's going to break down bacteria levels of Texas beaches and how often the water is tested.
And as Ernie, Frank, and I discuss the top headlines of the day, we want your thoughts, your questions, and concerns. Give us a call or send us a text at 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org.
Hello Houston is made possible in part by founding sponsors John Bradshaw and Kathy Sanders, and by gifts from listeners like you.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. President Trump says Russia no longer has until early September to commit to a ceasefire with Ukraine and avoid crippling sanctions. He's now giving President Vladimir Putin less than 2 weeks. Trump announced the new timeline to reporters today from his golf resort in Scotland, where he's been mixing presidential business with rounds of golf as supporters and protesters appeared near the Turnberry grounds. It's where he shook hands with EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen over the weekend to seal a trade deal. NPR's Marie Aspen has more on that.
President Trump says the United States has agreed to impose new taxes of 15% on imports from the European Union. Details remain sparse, but investors are relieved that these tariffs aren't as high as the 30% Trump had previously threatened. Now Wall Street is watching for other trade deals ahead of the president's Friday deadline to reach such agreements with dozens of countries. There's plenty going on at home this week as Amazon, Apple, and more than 150 big companies report quarterly earnings. The Federal Reserve also meets and is widely expected to hold interest rates steady despite Trump's ongoing pressure to lower them. Maria Aspen, NPR News, New York.
Israel's paused its attacks on Gaza to allow aid to get in. But despite widespread reporting, including NPR's, the government is still denying people across the Palestinian enclave are starving. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Hamas is spinning lies. But in Scotland today, President Trump said the images of starving children on TV look real to him. Aid groups and news organizations have independently confirmed video of women, men, and children queuing with empty pots or bowls at food distribution sites, risking a repeat of Israeli military gunfire, fights among themselves for the limited food, and possible death. The Wall Street Journal reports Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is preparing to fire members of a panel responsible for guidelines on primary care. NPR's Ping Wong says medical groups are expressing concern.
The members of the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force have backgrounds in medicine, research, and public health. Its 16 members make recommendations for primary care doctors on how to screen, advise, and treat their patients. Dr. Bobby Mukamala, president of the American Medical Association, says if they get dismissed, it's likely to affect the quality of the guidance.
That's just fundamentally not how we should treat the science of screening people for things like cancer, for things like diabetes, for things like cardiology issues.
Earlier this month, the AMA, along with more than 100 health organizations, signed a letter to members of Congress urging them to protect the integrity of this group. Ping Huang, NPR News.
The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 28 points at last check at 44,933. It's NPR News.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Alexandra Hart. The Harris County Sheriff's Office this morning is investigating a shooting that left 2 people injured last night. That's according to Harris County Sheriff Ed Gonzalez, who said in a social media post the female who was shot is 12 years old. The male is 19. Both had to be transported to a hospital. Their conditions are unknown at this point, but they are expected to survive. This happened at an apartment complex near Highway 6 in northwest Harris County. Police know who they are looking for, but the suspect remains at large. As the Houston area continues to see rapid growth, one organization is working to preserve the region's wetlands. News 88.7's Natalie Weber tells us the Coastal Prairie Conservancy recently added more than 200 acres to the region's protected lands.
The Three Oaks Farm in Waller is home to wetlands, grasslands, and agriculture. The Coastal Prairie Conservancy has recently entered into an agreement with the landowners. It will permanently protect the farm from development, Wesley Newman is the organization's conservation director.
The city of Houston is a large, sprawling metropolitan area, and we believe that it's important to have some areas of open space, green space.
The Conservancy has protected more than 19,000 acres of wetlands, prairies, and farms west of Houston. I'm Natalie Weber, News 88.7.
The Houston Astros might make a few moves this week as the trade deadline approaches. They're coming off getting swept by the Oakland Athletics and are currently just 4 games in front of the Mariners for first place in the American League West Division. They once had a 7-game lead. Jeff Balke is a writer for the Houston Press.
Ideally, you want a left-handed bat just because they don't have any lefties, but I'm not sure you can really care at this point. There's a lot of players I would covet on the trading block. I'm just not sure who the Astros can get.
Balke appeared on Houston Matters this morning. He says that the Astros will get additional help back when some of their injured players return. The trade deadline is this Thursday. I'm Alexandra Hart, News 88.7.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Capital One with the Capital One Saver Card. What's in your wallet? Terms apply. Details at CapitalOne.com. And the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation at macfound.org.
Live from the University of Houston, it's Hello Houston, an open forum on today's biggest stories affecting Houston and beyond. Call now, 713-440-8870, or let us know your thoughts on today's topics by emailing us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now here's your host for Hello Houston, Ernie Manous, Celeste Diaz-Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
And we are back together again.
Here we are.
So happy to be back. I miss you guys.
Well, we missed you too. We'll get into all that. It's so nice when we have guest hosts that slide in and out and help us out during the summer months. But it's so nice to have all 3 of us together. You were saying, Celeste, it just brings a different energy when we're all here.
It really does. And, it's one of those things. I mean, we've talked about this before. When you really enjoy, number one, we love what we do. And number 2, I love who I work with and the organization that I work with. And I thought about that a lot. I really appreciate the fact that I work for an organization that really understands, work-life balance and making sure that we get those moments to kind of take a reset.
Both of you took quite a balance. One of you went to the UK and the other went to Canada.
Yeah.
Yes.
So fill me in. Who wants to go first?
Well, I was in London. I was visiting my husband. He was working there for a little bit and for a week. And it was just great. It was my 3rd time going. And I had not been alone in a really long time. And so getting a moment, any parent knows when you have that moment, you really kind of, it starts out as like a little bit of guilt and then it quickly wears off. And then you're like, this is really nice. You mean I can actually have a full thought? So no, it was absolutely great. It was beautiful. It was a wonderful time, but I am actually really glad to be back.
Nice.
So,
and then Frank,
Canada.
I am
up north.
Watch me here. I'm going to get political.
Uh-oh.
Well, I was in Montreal,
Okay.
which is lovely, and the weather was great, and the food was great, and I smelled a little marijuana on the streets, like I do in New York City.
Yeah.
And so I looked it up. Is marijuana legal in Canada? Yes, it's legal throughout Canada. So I started exploring. They've had same-sex marriage since 2005. They have, as you know, very good health care, very good public education. Abortion is legal. They are in 2050, and we're trying to go back to 1950. And I thought, no wonder they were so insulted by someone wanting them to be the 51st state in America.
Sure.
They are so far away from any state socially progressive, and then nothing's perfect there. They have economic issues. They have housing affordability, which we're going to talk about here. So they have problems, just like everybody else does. But they don't have gun violence like we do. They seem to just have it kind of figured out like we had it figured out 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And suddenly it's all changed.
Yeah.
So, okay, that's my statement. But Montreal was beautiful. The flights were great. Air Canada.
It's
Loved
interesting
them.
that you say that, right? Because when you go to another country, you immediately start looking at those comparisons and parallels. And you see those things where I think as Americans, we often think that we do a lot of things really well. And then we also realize that there are also other countries that do a lot of things really well, and we are not the only ones, and we have to be cognizant of that.
Everyone owes it to themselves to travel beyond our borders, to see the world if they can afford it, if it's possible. It's so important to understand where we fit in when we see the rest of the world. You can get very myopic.
And it was very, and to another point, I went to the British Museum and the National Portrait Gallery, and something that I was looking at these amazing portraits and this art, and in so many ways there were so many depictions of grief and then love and war and heaven and themes that seem so far away when I use as a younger person being in London this time around. A lot of these themes felt very relevant and very much here we are still today dealing with some of these themes. But anyway.
Well, we'll be dealing with an awful lot today. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can see the whole team together again. Just go to our YouTube channel and just find us at Houston Public Media. That's our channel on YouTube, or just go to our website, hellohouston.org, and click the big orange banner. Quickly, Frank, anything in the weather we should be aware of?
No.
I wanted to think allergies are really bad, and then everyone said, no, allergies aren't bad. I just have a cold.
Oh.
Is that what you think it is? Because the allergies are okay, right?
There was some wildfire smoke up in Canada, so that didn't help me.
Yeah.
So if you hear me clearing my throat, that might be it. It's going to be hot this week. But, it's the last week of July. Yeah. And there's some rain chances toward the end of the week. I will say right now, there's nothing happening in the tropics, but we're getting into August. August, September are the times to watch. So
September. Are August and September usually very hot months?
August is usually the
hottest.
Yes.
And then I always think of the end of August, beginning of September is whatever bad hurricane's coming, that's when it's going to hit us.
Yeah.
Generally October 3rd is our date that we can start to relax. I mean, the season goes till November 30th. But for our part of the world, we get these fronts that start to kick in and keep storms away from us. Yeah. So August 3rd to 10th, that's about the last hurrah.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of hurrahs on today's show. We're going to be talking about a lot of different issues. We're going to be talking about affordable housing. We're going to be talking about bacteria levels in the water. We're going to be talking about mobile classrooms. But we are also going to be talking about the hot topics of the day with the headlines. And Celeste, it's so nice to say that again. Yes. Celeste, lead us off.
Thank you, Ernie. Hundreds of people made their voices heard on Saturday to protest a plan to redraw Texas's congressional maps. The large group gathered after a packed public hearing, which was held by the Texas House Select Committee on Congressional Redistricting. Prominent political figures, including former gubernatorial candidate Beto O'Rourke and several Texas Democrats, joined the crowd outside of UH's Student Center. Protesters voiced concerns that redrawing the maps mid-decade could dilute the voting power of communities of color. Several lawmakers questioned why redistricting is even on the agenda, noting the current congressional map was already redrawn in 2021 following the 2020 census. The committee chair says 700 people spoke, according to Representative John E. Rosenthal. More than 1,000 people signed up to give public comment. Those who didn't speak attended an unofficial breakout hearing at Wheeler Avenue Baptist Church, hosted by the Texas House Democratic Caucus. And joining us now is Houston City Council member from District C, Abbie Kamin, who was on stage at the event. Welcome to Hello Houston, Councilwoman Kamin.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. If you have questions or concerns, or you want to engage with us in this conversation, feel free to give us a call at 713-440-8870.
Now, Councilwoman Kamin, you have said that this redistricting will not only hurt Democratic voters, but also Republican voters. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so part of the challenge with redistricting in general is it's a very complicated process, and you hear a lot of terms like cracking and packing, and we get into a lot of the legal case law, right? So to make it simple, basically what's happening is the Trump administration has directed the state of Texas and Governor Abbott to find a way to add in 5 Republican congressional seats to what they already have. And that means taking away Democratic seats. But the only way to do that, because there's already 21 Republican seats and only 13 Democratic seats in Congress in Texas, you have to start putting a lot of minority voters in what we call minority opportunity districts, which is an important phrase that I hope we can talk about a little bit. But you start adding them into other districts. So you're cracking these districts up, breaking them apart, and then putting minority voters into other districts. And the only other districts they can no surprise, go into are these very strong Republican, oftentimes white districts. And so you're losing the opportunity for individual minority voters to have their own voice. But at the same time, you're putting them into districts that could also water down, I don't like to use that word, but I'm trying to simplify it, water down the strength of that Republican district as well.
Wasn't it Jasmine Crockett who said on Saturday something to the effect, and please correct my math if I'm wrong here, when you look at the percentages of who lives in this state, that we have only about 40% are what we call white voters, but that 65% of the districts are white heavy or whites. Help me with what I'm saying here.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And I'm not going to do just like you, I'm going to be very careful with the numbers so I don't say the wrong, give inaccurate information. But Texas is a majority minority state. That means that we have more minority residents that live in the state of Texas than we do Caucasian white voters. However, when you look at the balance of power, there are an overwhelming majority of quote unquote white districts, or those that elect a white, usually much more conservative candidate for those congressional districts. So there is a complete failure in terms of the balance of representation already. And that's where really important laws, longstanding laws, have come into place. And what I'm referring to is the Voting Rights Act, which was, we always talk about the Civil Rights Act, but it was actually the Voting Rights Act that was one of the most significant, with real teeth, civil rights laws that was enacted to protect minorities in this country, specifically in the South, where there's a very long and awful history of discrimination. And a lot of these challenges are being raised because the impact intentionally and just the effect of it, we're denying on the basis of race or language minorities an equal opportunity to participate in the political process. It's about the equal opportunity to participate.
Okay, we're talking to Abbie Kamin, City Council District, 713-440-8870 if you have a question. First of all, I have a couple. First of all, you said that the majority is the minority, people of color. Are they registered voters, or are they just population?
I would need to go back and look at those numbers. I think it will reflect both, regardless of race or class, or how you identify. We have a very low turnout when it comes to Texas voters. But if you look at both of the numbers, I think you will find a significant population is participating in terms of our minority voters.
Well, okay, my second question is, it sounds like your first comment suggested that this redistricting might backfire on the Republicans.
It could, but it depends on what the maps look like. And part of the problem with all of this is nobody has even seen the maps. So the state house and the state senate are holding a very limited amount of hearings, 7 total. And they're holding these hearings, public hearings, where the public can come and testify. That's what was happening at U of H this past weekend. But nobody has even seen the maps. So you can't even comment or provide meaningful response to what's happening. No one has seen the maps. What we have seen is this insane letter that the DOJ sent directing the state of Texas to do this, basically flipping all of the legal arguments that the state made in court in litigation on its head.
Let me talk about that not having maps yet, too, because Sophronia Thompson also brought that up, and so did other speakers on Saturday. And the plan is to have you folks move forward, have all your public comments and all of that before actually maps are released? Or was it the speed at which it has to happen, maps aren't together yet? Or the third option is maps are together, they're just not sharing them yet. They want to get all the public comments out of the way first, then back into Austin, maps come out and they vote.
Right. Word on the street from very, very
Word
reliable
on the
sources.
street? I like that.
They have the maps, right? The Trump administration handed the state of Texas these maps, and it was basically forcing their hand, and the state of Texas cowering to Trump. Again, not even, I've heard of a lot of conservatives and Republicans that are not comfortable with these maps. And I will say mid-decade redistricting as a whole is very rare, right? This is a bizarre process taking shape at the direction of the Trump administration. And you are correct. No one has seen the maps, but we know that they exist.
Now, Councilwoman Kamin, speaking of that, Texas current maps were, like you said, drawn in 2021 following the 2020 census. Some of those are still being fought over in court. So how can we how would we move forward if some of that is still being held up in the courts?
That's one of my positions. And I will say, I think it's really important that local elected officials and at every level of local government we're engaging on this because, again, the main focus, other than Mark Veazey's district, who's also a terrific congressman, this is all focused on Houston. So this is impacting the districts and the residents that I represent. It's impacting my congressional district, and I don't even have a congressperson right now, right? Because Abbott delayed the vote there.
Right.
But the litigation stems from the 2021 redistricting. Under the census, under the Constitution, redistricting happens every decade. And every decade since the Voting Rights Act was passed, a federal court has found that Texas has violated the law by legally discriminating against voters of color. So let that sink in. Every decade, a federal court has found the state of Texas has violated the law. So ongoing litigation happening in El Paso on these very maps. And the state of Texas, the very representatives that are now, quote unquote, drawing the maps, even though we know they're already drawn, swore under oath that this was a race blind process. There was no consideration of race whatsoever, so they can't have violated any law. What's crazy about this is, one, the court has not yet ruled in that case, so there's pending litigation. Then they come in, and again, I go back to that DOJ letter that says everything was done on race, and now you can't do that. And they're saying, oh, because we did it on race, we have to redraw them. So literally, they're flipping their argument, and you can't have it both ways. And they need to be deferring to the pending litigation in federal court.
So depending on how the litigation turns out, could that stop this process? If the litigation turns out that they support what was said in court, then legally they can't say what they're saying now. Or am I just Pollyanna here?
It could be a little Pollyanna. I certainly don't speak for any federal judges. I know if they took this many years to hear a case and then right after they conclude the hearings a few weeks later, the state legislature decides to do this, I wouldn't be thrilled. It all depends on whether or not you can get an injunction and then bring these maps into the current litigation. And that's one of the challenges. Again, I go back to the Voting Rights Act because the Supreme Court has been chipping away at the ability of individuals, but also groups to bring forward these cases. And a few years ago, I think it was 2013, there was this huge case that said you can no longer get preemptive approval or prevention for these types of maps. So these maps would have to go into effect first, then be challenged, and then you're hoping that a court puts a stop to it. But as we have seen, that is a very uncertain path, and it could be too little too late. We will be voting in the March primaries on these districts that are about to be redrawn in just a few months. Again, the 2026 midterm, the primaries for those midterms are in March, and we're talking about redrawing lines for a March primary. That's very concerning.
Once new maps, a real quick point of reference. So once maps are redrawn, how quickly do they go into effect? If the House or the Senate decide, and I guess the governor signs off on it, how quickly does it take effect?
It would take effect for next year, going into the 2026 midterm. So there's a special election for CD18 that's happening for this November. My understanding is that would not impact that race, but it will impact the March primary. All of this, going back to Trump, is geared towards securing the House of Representatives in Congress for the midterm election. It is a power grab because Trump is worried about losing the House.
Well, let's be honest. Both parties do it, right? Democrats and Republicans. But at the end of the day, is there, other than gnashing your teeth and holding up signs, is there anything to stop it? Because the courts haven't.
Right. That's what makes this so glim. I do want to encourage residents to participate in the very limited process that is available to them. So the committees, the special committees on redistricting for the state legislature have been limiting testimony to 2 minutes each and only allocating 5 hours. And over the weekend, they even started late. They're not even listing the order of those speakers. So allegedly, hundreds of people were even leaving because they couldn't wait around 5 hours, not knowing when they were going to be able to speak or if they could. All of that's being said, I personally submitted formal testimony on this on behalf of residents of the district and myself. Residents can engage. They can submit written testimony. The Senate has a portal that you can submit to. The House closed theirs, but our hope is it'll reopen for their last hearing, which is in Arlington. But using your voice matters, one, in terms of creating a record. If there is any hope through the courts, it is going to take a very clear record of the intent to discriminate here. And every one of us can be engaging to help preserve that record, to talk about the flaws and how this will impact each one of us.
And still call your elected officials at the state level? Is that what the best advice is? Get those calls in there. Regardless of how you feel about it, let your elected officials know that you're following this and that you're concerned with it, because so many of these folks in the future will be up for re-election and they are concerned what their constituents think for their own political future. So let your voice be heard.
Yeah, absolutely.
Houston City Council member from District C, Abbie Kamin, thank you for joining us today on Hello Houston.
Thank you. It's good to see you all back.
Thanks.
Coming up on Hello Houston, the founder and chair of Texans for Reasonable Solutions, Nicole Nosek. Her organization is pushing for policies that make it easier to build affordable homes, streamline local permitting, and expand housing options across the state. We'll find out more next. This is News 88.7.
There's an element of the food industry saying, okay, artificial dyes, if it makes them happy, we're going to change it, and hopefully they leave us alone. Because if this administration comes out and says less sugar, less fat, less salt, that will really throw this industry into a downward spiral.
I'm Natalie Kitroeff. That's Today on the Daily from the New York Times.
You can hear it tonight. It's on. It's 7 o'clock.
Today is New Member Monday. Embark on an exciting journey by becoming a new member of Houston Public Media. Kickstart your week with a commitment to supporting reliable news, educational documentaries, and captivating arts. Select a contribution level that suits you, and in return, enjoy exclusive access to our streaming service on the PBS app. Your donation at HoustonPublicMedia.org not only grants you these benefits, but also contributes to our mission of informing, educating, and inspiring Houston. Become a new member today.
I want to make a movie about this.
The Arts Hour brings you film.
The themes in it are so far ahead of their time.
Books.
The detail is amazing.
Art.
There's all the personal stuff.
Theatre.
Lots of singing and dancing and colours.
Music.
The dance floor is made for dancing.
And everything in between.
I want it to be exciting.
That's the Arts Hour with me, Nikki Beatty.
I really identified with it.
From the BBC.
The Arts Hour, Friday nights at 9 on News 88.7.
Support comes from the School of Science and Technology, a public charter school providing academic development through college preparatory and STEM-based learning models. Grades pre-K through 12, enrollment open now. Details at sstschools.org. Support comes from John Moore, helping with plumbing, electrical, and air conditioning repairs, including out-of-warranty units since 1965. Details at 730-2525 or at johnmooreservices.com.
And now back to Hello Houston. Join the conversation. Call now 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now here's Ernie Manous, Celestia Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
As Texas faces a growing housing crisis, a new group is stepping in with practical bipartisan ideas to help. Texans for Reasonable Solutions is pushing for policies that make it easier to build affordable homes, streamline local permitting, and expand housing options across the state. Joining us now is Nicole Nosek, the founder and chair of the board. She's here to explain what the organization hopes to accomplish and why this legislative session could be a turning point for housing in Texas. Nicole, welcome to Hello Houston.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I think the first thing that excites me is the word bipartisan, and wondering if that can be a reality in today's world.
You know, the fact is that whether you are Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, whatever you are, the housing affordability crisis has hit extremely hard, not only in Texas, but across America. Mm-hmm. And the fact is that this legislative session, legislators, both Democrat, Republican, were given the option, do you want to turn housing prices into California, where it's about in the mid $700,000 prices for any given home in California? Or do you want to preserve one of the most important things that Texas has to offer, which is affordable homes, allowing people to actually expand their families in a comfortable way, being able to preserve the Texas miracle.
So what do we, and I've read all about your work in San Francisco. So what are we doing wrong here in Texas, and what can we do right?
Well, let me tell you exactly what California and San Francisco has done wrong and how that plays into what we were doing in Texas and how that plays into what we do not want to do in Texas.
Okay.
So
I'm all ears.
In San Francisco, it takes above 800 days to get a permit back.
Yes.
That is insane. Mm-hmm. And there was actually a really interesting University of Texas Austin study that showed that every 3.5 months delay adds up to 5% to the final price tag. So putting aside the actual ability to build homes or to build missing middle homes, and when I say missing middle homes, I'm talking about townhomes, I'm talking about apartments, I'm talking about cottage homes. Putting aside the ability to actually even be able to build that, which many cities across Texas say, no, you can't build missing middle housing, there's also a huge permitting problem. And what a lot of these bills did was it said, okay, if you are in commercial land, which in any given city, about 20% of any given city is commercial land. Well, there was actually a Pew Trust study that was done that showed that about 75% of Texans like the idea of being able to build apartments and homes above restaurants, above grocery stores, in city centers. And so this was a huge positive step forward, because now instead of going through the long permitting process, what Texas legislators have basically said is, if it's good enough for a Whole Foods or for an H-E-B to be there, it's probably good enough for people to live above there. And we've seen that these types of multi-use spaces have been wildly successful. There's been a lot of demand. People like the idea of being able to wake up, especially as a young professional or a more senior citizen. They like the idea of being able to wake up, go downstairs, get their coffee, walk their dog. The fact is that while single-family homes are important, there are so many other kinds of housing options where people would have access to those types of housing options if we simply built the product and if city governments allowed that product to be built.
Well, what are you doing to make sure that happens? Because it sounds like a brilliant idea.
Yeah, so we did that this session. Huge hats off to Senator Hughes. Basically, what this law said was it said that in any commercial space, in any county of over 300,000, within cities of over 150,000, which includes Houston, you could build apartments of a minimum 5 to 6 stories and above. And so this by right accelerates the process as long as it meets some of the safety requirements that are already set forth by the city, as long as it meets the floodplain requirements, which we know is very critical to Texans, especially after this really sad catastrophe. People can build those types of homes without waiting in long waits for those permits. They just have to meet what they call by right, which is a check mark. Do they fulfill the safety requirements on electric, on floodplains, on water? Yes, yes, yes. Okay, great, they could build. So that's just one law recently that was passed. It was also Representative Hefner that passed it in the House, signed by the governor. But there's also a few other laws that are going to be absolute game changers.
Before you get to those laws, I just want to clarify something you said when you were talking a moment ago. You referred to apartments. Are you talking about rental properties? Or are you talking about condos or things people can actually purchase?
It opens it up for what the market wants.
Okay.
And so what we see is that already things like there's certain laws that are in place that prevent people from getting access to apartments, to smaller lot homes. And the fact is that if we simply relax some of those laws and make it so that people can decide what kind of home products they want to build, whether it's a condominium that they can own or whether it's an apartment that they can rent, the market ends up accommodating to what people want. We've seen that, which I'm going to, if you're okay with it, I want to move on to one of the next laws that we copied Houston, actually in your guys' backyard, the minimum lot size reform. So some of the folks who are listening to this or watching this may have remembered Houston's minimum lot size reform in the late 1990s. There's a lot of news around it, and basically it reduced the minimum lot size from 5,000 square foot to 1,400 square foot. It was an absolute game changer for affordability. And I think you folks in Houston should be really proud because it's the only major city across the country that your median home price is actually lower than the American median home price. Now, don't get me wrong, no city is doing affordability exactly right, but what I would argue is that Houston is doing affordability some of the most right compared to other cities that we've seen in the major population bracket. And so what we have seen from Senator Betancourt, who's there in Houston, and what we've seen from Representative Gary Gates, who's right on the outskirts there in Houston, was they passed a law that says if you have 5 acres of unplatted land, you can by right build homes on 3,000 square foot lots. So I don't want to bombard you with data here, but what was fascinating was Pew Trust did a study on this, and what they found was that when Houston reduced the lot size to 1,400 square foot, all of the homes built under what the previous minimum lot size was now cost $345,000 compared to anything above the other minimum lot size, which was $510,000. So we're talking almost a 40% difference in price just by allowing people to buy a little bit less land. The way that I look at this is across Texas, before Senator Betancourt and before Chairman Gates passed this law, we basically have made Volvos illegal and forced people to buy the Lamborghini of homes. It's a very un-Texas way to do things.
Let me ask you this, and I'm all for it, but do we have the infrastructure? All of these places we're going to build, they all have toilets, they all have sinks and bathtubs. You got to have water. You have to have pipes that will take that water where it needs to go to get cleaned. It's got to go back into the system. And then the traffic in this city it's increased tenfold in the last 5 years.
That's actually one of our biggest talking points. So I'm so glad that you brought that up. The fact is that this session was also a huge energy session. It was a huge water session. And that's why these bills, I think, got such good traction. When you take a look at water, when you allow missing middle housing, so we're talking apartments, townhomes, basically what people have seen is that you use half of the water consumption, because ultimately, if you take a look at somewhere like Frisco, 50% of the water in Frisco goes to watering front lawns. Here we are in a deep concern across Texas of what are we going to do with water, and yet cities are forcing homeowners to buy huge front lawns that then people are watering. A lot of these people don't even want huge front lawns. And again, we're not making huge front lawns illegal, but we're saying if people don't have the money to buy a huge front lawn and they don't want a huge front lawn, why are we forcing folks to do that? This is a huge water issue. And the fact is, when you allow people to live in apartments, when you allow people to live into townhomes, to plexes, they're ultimately using far less water, just in the use case of Frisco. Another point you bring up, energy, a super important issue as to whether Texas is going to even be able to grow when you take a look at AI, when you take a look at all the people that are moving here. Well, there was actually a study done on, again, missing middle housing. And what we saw was that when people have smaller forms of housing, when you look at air condition, heaters, they use 42% less energy. So the question here is not, do we have the infrastructure for this? We simply don't have the opportunity to keep sustaining as we were before these bills were passed. You bring up traffic. We've seen studies that traffic goes significantly down because now people don't have to drive out from Timbuktu and back to get to their work. They're able to live closer to where they work, which not only cuts down on the amount of emissions, but it also cuts down on traffic. People aren't using the roads as much and they get to spend more time with their family. A hugely important benefit, especially with what Texas faces today.
We are speaking with Nicole Nosek, who is the founder and chair of Texans for Reasonable Solutions. I'm curious, I remember a few years back, maybe 10 years now, we had kind of taken a shift from everybody having to own a home as their future into the idea that rental and whatever's available and whatever an individual prefers, that maybe the American dream is no longer owning your own home. Has that shifted back, that is still the primary investment and people should be pursuing that from your point of view?
That's a great question. And I want to bring up a really important data point that answers to exactly that. You know, my generation, some of the generations behind us, we don't have the same opportunity of the American dream that a lot of other generations have had. And so it's really fascinating going into the legislature. There was a little bit of disconnect where some of the legislators didn't quite understand that the idea that you're going to buy a home in your mid-20s or early 30s is not available to our generation anymore. The fact is, there was an up for growth research study that was done across Texas. We are over 300K in shortage of supply. In fact, the comptroller did a report on that. And the fact is that, you know, you talk about ownership versus renting, 48% of American youth, and I'm talking about youthful adults between 18 to about 32, are living with their parents, not because they love their parents, which I hope they do. They're living with their parents because they don't have homes to buy at a price point that's affordable to them. And so what these bills will do is they will bring more supply onto the market. Just like the comptroller said, the biggest issue right now is that there's not enough supply. So similar to musical chairs, if you've got 10 homes and you've got 30 people competing over 10 homes, those 10 homes, even if they should be worth maybe 200K, 300K, those get driven up to 800, 900K. And if you want to see the perfect case scenario, you look at San Francisco, you look at the Bay Area, if you want to know how to screw up a housing market.
You're listening
when
to...
you allow more housing to come online, ultimately these prices become more affordable because it becomes a buyer's market. It becomes a renter's market. So whether somebody actually wants to spend more money on stocks or whether they want to invest in the American dream of homeownership, they now have that option. Whereas before, about half of Americans don't really have that option that once existed 4 or 5 decades ago. I want to point out that stat that I just discussed about half of young Americans living with their parents. That is the highest it's been in 7 decades.
Wow.
So this is an anomaly, and I really commend the legislature for addressing that this session. I want to also point out the lieutenant governor, also in your backyard, prioritized that minimum lot size bill, because what you guys had done in Houston took huge strides towards making the American dream of homeownership available for grandkids, kids, coworkers. The fact is, small businesses, we've seen in Austin, small businesses shut down because even though restaurants are paying $20 to their employees, those employees can't find anywhere to live on a $20 per hour wage. That's ridiculous.
You're listening to Hello Houston. We're speaking with Nicole Nosek, Texans for Better Solutions. We do have a call on the line. Allison from West Side of Houston. Allison, welcome to Hello Houston. What is your question or comment for Nicole?
Hey, Nicole, this is Allison Griffin. I'm with Cross Country Mortgage and been a lender in the affordable space since 1993. And these are all great points you're bringing up. But I think maybe where we missed the mark, especially in Houston, is we're not getting the word out enough on the affordable homes that this city has done a fabulous job of promoting. For example, now with the Houston Harvey Fund, families can get up to $125,000 in down payment assistance. That gets mortgage payments as low as $1,300 a month. So your person you gave the example of $20 an hour could afford that. You've got between land trust, and hats off to Commissioner's Court that they pushed that. Community Land Trust will get mortgage payments as low as $1,100 on new construction, and because the land is not part of the mortgage, it keeps a cap on how much the payments rise, and they can only rise up 5% a year. You've got a great job by Harris County CSD with Bridget and Sherry leading the charge over there, where you've got down payment assistance of $23,000 to buy a house in unincorporated Harris County. I've even helped families on Section 8 stabilize, use those funds, and now they're not on the voucher anymore, which helps the next family that's in there. You've got single family new home that's going to be starting their project up on Ella in 1960, where they're going to subsidize those homes 40% on a sales price of $240, brand new houses. Yet Sherry Cooper is leading the charge on the rehab, where they're going out in the county and buying houses and setting it so that buyers at 80% or less area median income can purchase homes and not getting the bidding wars that you said. But there's a whole lot of great stuff going on in Houston. I just want to kind of get that out in the air.
Allison, thank you for all those points. Allison called 713-440-8870. Yes, please respond.
No, I really appreciate what you're saying, Alice. And I want to point out Allison Hayes, who is the CEO of Houston Habitat for Humanity, I'm sure is involved in a lot of those programs, has done phenomenal work in similar programs, but also, looking at some of the policies that we were passing, we consulted organizations like that. And the fact is that Allison Hayes drove me and my team around, showed us a lot of the lots that Houston Habitat for Humanity was building on. And the fact is that these policies will be a game changer, whether you're Habitat for Humanity or whether you're just a family that's trying to buy a little piece of the American dream of homeownership. So you bring up really valid points. Thank you, Alice.
So I do have a question. So, you're basically saying allowing more homes to be built would help moderate housing costs. But in Houston, we don't have zoning. And how would you essentially regulate a builder coming in and putting in a beautiful new huge Whole Foods and building luxury, apartments, and it not outprice people that need the affordable housing and aren't just, looking for a more luxury walkable area, but versus somebody who needs to work?
I think it's a really great question that you're asking. I want to point to research by a researcher named Evan Mass. And he pointed out that when he went into, when there was a 200-unit apartment building put up, market rate, so this wasn't subsidized, there weren't credits used on this, immediately in the surrounding area, the rents dropped by 6%. That is huge. And then to the alternative, if you look at places like Aspen, Colorado, where it's in the $3 to $4 million range for a home because they don't allow more homes to get built. If you look at, and I'm sorry if I'm boring you guys, San Francisco, the median home price there is $1.3 million. And if you take a look at places like Houston, they build far more homes in Houston than Oakland, Marin, and San Francisco combined. And so what happens
I'm sorry, but we also have a lot more room to build. I mean, you go to San Francisco and they're essentially landlocked. So a lot of that essentially is you have a lot of people in a very small area, And I would imagine building materials and insurance are just essentially going to be higher in those areas.
Respectfully, no, that's not the case. If you go inwards from San Francisco to where they somewhat call it the suburbs, it's called the Richmond area. You'll find that there's a lot of townhomes, but they really are not. They don't allow a permissive culture where you could build up. So yes, in the downtown area, you find that. But you'll find that there's a lot, they make it tremendously hard if you want to start a new project, to the point where, and back to some of the studies here, Pew Trust did a study on moderately regulated markets versus highly regulated markets for land use. And what they found was that in the highly regulated markets, there was a difference of 40% of supply of homes and then 20% price differentiation, which is huge. So when you allow more homes to come online, you have a buyer's market. Whereas when you don't allow more homes to come online, what you're finding in similar, to areas like California, you have wealthy people that are going into what should be naturally occurring affordable housing. So maybe it's an apartment building that got built 10, 12 years ago that should have been a decent price for a school teacher or a firefighter. Well, now you're getting a wealthy person going in there, renovating it, making it into a luxury apartment, because similar to the luxury apartment that you hypothesized earlier, that doesn't exist because there's not many of those.
As someone who lived outside of San Francisco, I lived in San Ramon for a while. Even in the suburbs, the housing market is ridiculous. I mean, a small house was over $1 million. That was clearly needed a lot of work. But again, my question goes back to, it sounds very simplifying, just by building more homes and apartments. There's also a lot of people in neighborhoods who don't want massive apartments being built all around them.
So, I respect what you're saying. A lot of the policies that we passed were in new neighborhoods. So we're in this very unique position where if you look at Dallas, about 40%, 38% to be exact, land in Dallas is undeveloped. So there's so much land that is out of people's backyards that you could build the type of missing middle housing that young people, that working professionals, that young families so need. Also, I'd like to point out, you bring up you had another point and it totally slipped my mind. But
I'll let it slip back in. We're talking with Nicole Nosek, who is the founder and chair of Texans for Reasonable Solutions. Our number here is 713-440-8870. And we've got a call from Stephanie from Clear Lake. Stephanie, what's on your mind?
Hi, I'm so grateful to hear this show today because my family just came back from California for a vacation. And
welcome
our
back.
main topic was, how do people afford to live there? And it's all, I've resented that because I'm a school teacher. And my question is, where are school teachers supposed to live? Mm-hmm. And I see that I've always been proud of Houston, and I'm seeing that happen. We used to live in Oak Forest, and we had a great ranch. And in the last year, it's been just leveled. And this huge home has been built, and it's priced out of everyone who used to be able to live in Oak Forest. So my question is, in Houston, we have so many older homes that are affordable, but they're being plowed down to build these giant, 3-story homes. Why aren't we renovating those smaller homes that are all around the Houston area to allow and to keep affordable housing? Because I understand the rebuilding and the building, but we already have homes that are lovely ranch homes, and they're kind of being plowed down to build these giant homes that do price people out. Oak Forest was an affordable neighborhood when we bought our first home. Mm-hmm. We couldn't live there as a teacher. And I definitely, if I wasn't married as a teacher, which is somewhat unfair, I couldn't afford a home on my salary. But just looking at what California is and what I hope we don't become, why aren't we renovating homes that are already built in these neighborhoods instead of just building and building?
Stephanie, thank you for your call. Nicole.
Yeah, it's a great question. And, we've seen similar policies take place, and huge, actually back to something I wanted to answer earlier. In Austin, there was about 6,000 square foot minimum lot size. Austin, about a year and a half ago, copied exactly what Houston had done on minimum lot size. And they reduced it from about 6,000 square foot, 5,750 to be precise, and they reduced it to 1,850, about 2,000 square foot. What they found was that the median price of that home went down significantly, and American Enterprise Institute just published numbers on that. The fact is that when you allow people to renovate, to put more missing middle housing, it becomes more, prices become far more affordable. Now, you as a school teacher, what's very unique about Houston is that because people are allowed to build more quickly up and out, you find that a school teacher in Houston is going to have a far easier time buying a home than somewhere like Dallas. And so we've seen, even if the policies aren't perfect, they are more perfect than other parts of Texas. And so policies that have worked is exactly what we're double clicking on. Don't get me wrong, there are some programs that have been brought up earlier that have had great success. We see Houston Habitat for Humanity doing things. We see Community Land Trust. But on a larger scale, the fact is that when you take a look at cities that just focus on policies that are individual, while that helps the individual families and people, which is very important, we're looking at making things affordable at scale. And when you look at economies, Pew Trust just did a study on this, where they took a look, they studied policies in Mississippi where people are more low income, but where there's relatively lax land use laws. What they found is that homelessness was far lower than other areas, because even if you didn't have that much money, you were able to afford a home. And somebody brought up earlier, well, what if we don't want an apartment in our city? At the end of the day, if that's not your land, who are we who are we to decide what happens to somebody else's land, especially if it's in a different neighborhood, especially if it's above the HEB that we shop in every day?
One more question for you. If you build affordable housing 10 miles outside of town, then you've got to build schools and police stations and garbage pickup, and you have to have everything that...
The infrastructure.
Yeah. All that. And an affordable housing complex has to be able to afford to support that. So it seems like a big conundrum to just build affordable housing and not have the schools and the fire stations and the police stations and everything else.
Respectfully, I disagree. If you don't build... So currently what we're seeing is in cities that don't allow people to build missing middle housing. We're talking apartments, we're talking detached townhomes. People are then forced to create entirely different cities. And so both Sightline and Strong Towns did studies that showed you 10x the amount of costs when you build all of these new pipes, when you build out entirely new cities, because somebody said, I don't really want somebody to go into my city and build something 10 miles away, an apartment. I want somebody to build entirely new. Now, if you take a look at somewhere like Southlake, Texas, there are frequent reports of the amount of declining school admissions because young families simply can't afford to live somewhere where the median home price is between $1 and $2 million for a home. So when you look at schools, when you look at driving up the prices of homes, the fact is school teachers, school students, young families, they can't afford some of these places. But when you allow that missing middle housing to come online, you are creating a far more economical system for cities and their infrastructure costs.
All right, we gotta go.
Nicole Nosek is the founder and chair of Texans for Reasonable Solutions. Nicole, thanks for joining us, and thanks for having this very important conversation right here on Hello Houston. And coming up on Hello Houston, we'll continue diving into the top stories of the day. Stay with us for the second hour of Hello Houston. We'll be back.
Stay tuned. There's more Hello Houston on the way with Ernie Manous, Celeste Diaz-Sherman, and Frank Billingsley. For the latest in local news, subscribe to the Hello Houston daily newsletter at houstonpublicmedia.org. Hello Houston is a production of Houston Public Media. The opinions expressed by the guests of this program are solely their own and do not represent the views of management, staff, or underwriters of Houston Public Media. This is News 88.7.
Support Houston Public Media by donating a vehicle you no longer need. We'll take it in any condition. It's free to you, easy to do, and it could mean hundreds of dollars in support. Visit houstonpublicmedia.org/cars to learn more. Thanks.
We'll have a mostly sunny day today, slight chance of shower later. This is your NPR station, KUHF Houston, a service of the University of Houston.
Just ahead on this hour of Hello Houston, we'll continue discussing today's top stories, including a recent UH Hobby School of Public Affairs poll that found that more than half of Harris County voters say the county is moving in the wrong direction. I'm Celeste Diaz-Sherman.
And I'm Frank Billingsley. We'll also talk with Dr. Jennifer Orme-Zavaleta of the Environmental Protection Network, who will break down the EPA changes under the Trump administration.
And I'm Ernie Manous. We'll also learn more about Collab-Lab, a mobile classroom that brings high-quality early childhood education directly to families at no cost.
And we want to hear what you have to say, so give us a call or text, 713-440-8870, or email us, talk@hellohouston.org. You can also watch us on our YouTube channel. Just go to hellohouston.org and click on the big orange banner.
Hello Houston is made possible in part by founding sponsors John Bradshaw and Kathy Sanders, and by gifts from listeners like you.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. President Trump is hosting the British Prime Minister at his golf club in Scotland. NPR's Franco Ordonez reports the two are discussing trade and Russia.
The two discussed a series of global challenges from trade to Gaza, but he made news on the war in Ukraine and the lack of a ceasefire. Trump said he was disappointed in Russian President Vladimir Putin after recent strikes killing civilians. And because of that, he was shortening a previous 50-day deadline for a ceasefire to 10 to 12 days, or face massive secondary tariffs on Moscow's trade partners.
There's no reason to wait. If you know what the answer is going to be, why wait?
Trump said Russia's economy would be so much better if it was not so focused on war and killing people. Franco Ordonez, NPR News, Turnberry, Scotland.
The European Union is agreeing to a 15% tariff on goods it sells in the U.S. in exchange for letting American-made goods into Europe tax-free. Bloomberg opinion columnist Lionel Laurent tells NPR the Europeans, as other countries, don't have the stomach for a protracted trade war.
I think there was a hope that the EU would be able to kind of really tough it out. It has the tools to retaliate, but in the end, it's chosen to kind of accept in a sort of anticlimax this 15% number, which is in line with what Japan got, so it's not a huge surprise. But compared to the terms of trade that the EU had with the US before, there's no retaliation. There's the promise to buy more US goods.
The trade deal still requires approval from the EU's member countries. Two leading Israeli human rights organizations say they've examined Israel's war in Gaza from a health perspective. They say they believe that Israel's actions constitute genocide under the 1948 Genocide Convention, a UN treaty. More from NPR's Emily Fang.
Israel's B'Tselem and the Israeli branch for the organization Physicians for Human Rights both say in separate reports that Israel's military's actions in Gaza have destroyed the enclave's healthcare system in a manner, quote, both calculated and systematic. Physicians for Human Rights argues the assault on Gaza's healthcare system is, quote, part of a deliberate policy targeting Palestinians as a group, and therefore constitutes genocide under the 1948 Convention, which was largely conceived as a response to the Holocaust. David Mencer, a spokesperson for Israel's prime minister, told reporters the office, quote, strongly rejects the report's findings. Mencer said Israel's military targets, quote, terrorists and never civilians. Emily Fang, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
U.S. stocks are mixed this hour. The Dow is down 19 points. The S&P has gained 1. The Nasdaq is up 50. It's NPR News.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Alexandra Hart. State representatives met at the University of Houston Saturday to hear public testimony as part of the mid-decade round of congressional redistricting. News 88.7 government reporter Andrew Schneider says that hundreds of residents turned out to voice their opposition to the redrawing of congressional maps, which comes under pressure from President Donald Trump and Governor Greg Abbott.
Public criticisms of the redistricting plan ranged from accusations of racism to cowardice to corruption. But Ashley Tabor, a New Jersey transplant, had an unusual take. The proposal was simply bad business practice.
Good businessmen and women embrace the free market. They welcome competition because they believe that their ideas have merit and are innately persuasive. As soon as they start to cheat, one has to wonder whether their mission was ever noble or in the best interest of their stakeholders.
President Trump has said he wants Texas to redistrict so the GOP can pick up 5 congressional seats next year. Texas lawmakers have yet to unveil any proposed map. I'm Andrew Schneider, News 88.7.
The Houston Restaurant Week's events kicks off on Friday. It includes exclusive meals at more than 300 restaurants. Katie Stone, president of the Cleverly Stone Foundation, says it's scheduled when most restaurants see less traffic.
August is the slowest month of the year for nationwide for restaurants. But guess what? Houston has their busiest month of the year.
Each meal includes at least $1 donation to the Houston Food Bank. Over the years, Houston diners have contributed more than $22 million, which adds up to 66 million meals, according to the food bank. The events run through the end of September. Meanwhile, the FBI, along with other federal agencies, are looking into an incident that occurred on the Carnival Dream, a cruise liner that set sail out of Galveston. Authorities haven't revealed the exact nature of the investigation, although multiple outlets are reporting it's a death investigation. Passengers on board said they woke up to the sounds of sirens in the early morning hours and heard a request for medical assistance on one of its decks. I'm Alexandra Hart, News 88.7.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include ARM, with the new podcast series Tech Unheard. ARM CEO Renee Haas talks to tech company leaders who are working to help shape the future of computing. Available on all podcast platforms.
Live from Houston Public Media and News 88.7, it's Hello Houston, an open forum on today's biggest stories affecting Houston and beyond. Call now, 713-440-8870, or let us know your thoughts on today's topics by emailing us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now here's your host for Hello Houston, Ernie Manous, Celestia Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
We're back.
We are.
That was
and
such
caught
an
us off
interesting
guard.
Yes.
We were.
I really liked our last interview.
Oh,
she was well prepared and very interesting.
Yeah.
And knows whereof she speaks.
Yes. Yeah, but I do think with it, we did get a lot of interaction and there were a lot of questions. Again, right here in Hello Houston, you can follow us or watch us on YouTube. You can join the conversation at 713-440-8870. I feel like we haven't said our phone number very much.
We haven't.
The truth says free markets aren't in the business of cheap pricing.
Right.
I don't know. Mattress Mac always says, sell to the masses, eat with the classes. So he's a great capitalist businessman, and he is in the business of cheap pricing and doing it to everyone.
Just quickly to remind everyone what the topic was we were talking about, we had Nicole Nosek on. She is the founder and chair of Texans for Reasonable Solutions, looking at more affordable housing across our state in a bipartisan way.
Yes, and I think it was one of those things, though. I understand what she was talking about, and she was basically saying building more would, moderate the housing prices. It's a supply and demand kind of situation. The more supply you have, there's more options. But again, it's in the suburbs of San Francisco, housing is still very expensive. I mean,
Sure.
and there is a lot of options. There are a lot of apartments, and it's still, that it is packed. I also think, though, one of the reasons, and this is not any way, shape, or form scientific or research, but a lot of the areas when you look at very expensive housing, San Francisco's weather, California's weather is beautiful. And it's nice.
You kind of pay for that,
You're paying for your surrounding also.
Well, that's a point.
You know, you're paying for beautiful climate. You're paying for, you know, you can go to Napa, you can go hiking anywhere. I don't know. I just, it's interesting. But there is a comment. We did get a comment on YouTube. Celeste, did you take advantage of having tea time while in London? I did. I went to high tea at Fortnum Mason. It was very, very nice. Thank you for asking. We also had some other comments. Frank, you read the truth free markets aren't the business of cheap pricing. Denise Ehrlich said, I'd like to see a large tax break from the city and county for rehabbing all the existing bungalows inside the loop. And Alex Garza wrote, this was a great interview. Bring Nicole back.
Yeah, definitely. She knows her stuff.
She sure does.
And talking about bringing things back, all of us are back together again. And if you don't believe it, you can go to YouTube and see all three of us here smiling at you and back in. It's at YouTube. Just look for the Houston Public Media channel. Remember to like, subscribe, and ring that bell when you do. As always, we like to say there's a whole bunch of comments that go on there. Another conversation, practically another show happens on YouTube. So if you're by your computer, watch us that way. Also, you can email us, talk@hellohouston.org. Frank, how's that weather looking?
You know what? Hot and dry. I have nothing in the tropics, although the Pacific is super duper active. But a lot of times this happens where the Pacific will be active and the Atlantic will not be that active. It looks like that might switch over the next 2 weeks. So going into August, we're going to have to watch out.
Yeah, you see, the weather keeps Houston's housing prices lower.
Well, if we had California weather, we would have 15 million people here instead of 7.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, yeah.
But we love every one of you that is here.
Absolutely.
Let you know that.
Heart.
Sure we do.
We've got a lot more coming up on the show. We're going to be taking a look at the changes happening over at the EPA and a lot more. But as always, we love to talk about the topics of the day. You're pointing to me?
You got it. No. I'm just saying. You got it, baby.
You want me to bring up the topic? Because you got a good one to start with.
I do have a good one.
We've been following because we've had some of the players right here on the show.
That's right. More than half of Harris County voters say the county is moving in the wrong direction. And they're sizing up local leaders and county judge candidates ahead of the 2026 election. And this is per a recent University of Houston Hobby School of Public Affairs poll. Crime, poor street conditions, and flooding rank among the top problems in Harris County. That's what, according to these voters. And the survey also gauged voters' views on local elected officials and 4 potential 2026 county judge candidates. Those are County Judge Lena Hidalgo, former 3-term Houston Mayor Anise Parker, Houston City Council member Letitia Plummer, and Republican Piney Point Mayor Eliza Dutt. Hidalgo had a 45% approval rating, second highest overall, but her 41% disapproval gives her a slim 4% net approval. We want to hear from you. Is Harris County headed in the wrong direction? Now is the time to give us a call and tell us your thoughts at 713-440-8870.
My first thought is very basic. This election is so far away, and yet we're so wrapped up in it already. The primaries for each party don't even happen until next spring, and then the election down the road, and it's just... It's 2027. We're looking for the person to take place. It feels like there's a lot more pressing things happening right now, but the race is on already. These cycles get closer and closer. It's interesting that Hidalgo has a 45 approval rating. They say second highest overall. I'm assuming it's Mayor Anise Parker that has the number 1 approval rating of the 4 of them, but I don't know. I don't see the numbers for that.
Well, didn't Hidalgo get the $600,000 war chest that suddenly showed up?
She did. She got an increase. I'm not sure the numbers exactly, but her money, all of a sudden, she had a big amount of money come in. Yep. She was working in a deficit for a while there, and then all of a sudden, now she was on our show, and I asked her the question about if she was planning on running because she still hasn't made that announcement. I took from it that I thought definitely she was running from the way she answered. Others that heard the same interview took the total opposite and thought she wasn't running. Yes, Frank.
Her money went from $41,300 to $600,000 between January and June, primarily due to refunds for legal services, not new donations. Right. But she has this big war chest to run, but she wouldn't really answer us when we asked if she was running.
No.
She had one, and if I apologize if I'm misquoting what she said, but I do believe what I took away from it was she was planning to make her announcement, but then new issues came in the way and paused her announcement, and she would make it in the next few weeks. I took from that, you're only planning a big announcement if you're planning to run again in her position. And I think if you were not going to run again, you didn't need a big ramp up to announce that. So if things changed, if new stories, if new things were happening, it would still be, well,
I'm not a politician, but if I were asked about a third term, I would just say,
I would say have a big announcement.
I would say, well, right now I plan on it, unless something weird happens. And then you could always say, I decided not to.
I think that, I think it's politics. She's keeping her cards close to her chest in that,
right. But why?
Because if one, she might not be ready. She's in her strategy planning place of, okay, what is this announcement going to look like? What is my campaign going to look like? She's going up against some big, heavy hitters that came out early and said, hey, we're coming for you. And well-known, proven past records, Anise Parker, she's in many ways very beloved in the city. And, you have Eliza Dutt, who's coming out, and she is, the mayor in Piney Point. And then if she's not planning to run, she can't just say, no, I'm not planning, because then people are like, well, she has a foot out the door. What is she going to do? She's a lame duck.
That's the other part of it.
So, but to your point, if you are planning on running, I would say something now to try to take the momentum away from some of these big names. And say, yes, I am planning on running. I don't know why they're wasting their time and money trying to run against me. I'm the incumbent.
I think you should run.
I'm not running, Brady.
But I think the
I'm
reason
running away
to Canada.
Some would argue that Anise Parker coming out as early as she did to make her announcement was to say to Hidalgo, I'm in the race. Your time has come to an
Well,
end.
it was also very interesting timing when former Mayor Anise Parker did come out to make her announcement. It also happened during a very controversial time when the judge, Lena Hidalgo, was in Paris.
Right.
And so I also think that was a strategy, a part of it. And they're also, I don't know, but speculating here that, maybe Hidalgo, Judge Hidalgo is thinking, I'm going to let them have this moment when it steams out, because we're still far out of the actual election.
Here's the big question. Do our listeners think that Harris County is headed in the wrong direction? Or has Lena done a good job? If you want to chime in, 713-440-8870 or YouTube, send us a comment there. But what do you think?
What do you think?
I think the county has done a lot, but my focus has always been on flood control. Mm-hmm. And I think we've done a lot to mitigate flood control. I think we're doing a lot with roads and fixing roads. That's sort of the county and the city, depending on, what road.
Yeah.
I think crime has come down. I think there's been a pretty good influx of extra police and extra firefighters.
Well, they're definitely working on making sure that we can recruit and
it seems
looking
like
at
the
wages.
city and the county are working together.
Yeah. From my uneducated point of view, I thought public health was handled well by the county during the pandemic.
I got a monkeypox vaccine. Good for you. It was so simple. I was like, oh, wow, look at this.
Yeah, but it hurt.
I do think
it did hurt, but it was free.
That is,
one too?
Yeah, I agree. I do think that is one thing that our county does very well. And during that time, during COVID, right when it was launching, I was working as a producer at Fox 26, and we would see those numbers coming in, and I would watch those briefings, and I do think that is something compared to other cities, that are relatively comparable in size. Houston does a very good job when it comes to our public health.
But you always have to remember, this is the weirdness of politics. Perception and reality are two very different things. Everything could be going in a perfect direction, but if the perception is it's not, or there's a challenger who challenges it in a way that connects with an audience better, it's the perception. I think the perception of what's happening at the county has not been as strong as we're talking about the reality of it.
The only negative perception I have of the county is there's a lot of bickering.
Yes.
They just can't seem to get along. I know there are, 5 of them? And it's like the city council does a really good job. Houston City Council does a good job, I think,
Thank God
of
there's never
working
any
things out.
bickering among the 3 of us.
No bickering.
Everything works perfectly here. Anyway, give us your thoughts on what you think about what's going on in the county. 713-440-8870. Are you following the race already? Do you have a quote-unquote horse in the race? Do you have someone you'd like to see pull ahead in the pack? Yes.
And go ahead. I'm sorry, Ernie, finish.
No, that was basically it. Give us a call.
Yes, 713-440-8870. Sorry, I was looking at this, because we did have some comments come in that I found very interesting on our YouTube. Connor Richmond says, housing is always a supply and demand issue. More housing can be built regardless of weather. Single-family zoning is a huge issue. The guest speaker was right. Up zoning will and does help. Texas SB 2835 passed, allowing apartments up to 6 stories and 24 units to only have a single staircase, which makes apartments, there's lots of text going on, which makes apartments where every bedroom has windows much easier to build. Housing is land use. So.
Thank you. Good to know.
I thought that was interesting.
Yes,
I thought it was very
is.
important. And yes, I'm not necessarily saying that our speaker was wrong in any way, shape, or form. I just think it's very... This is something, affordable housing is so important.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
so, I'm glad that we are bringing in different perspectives. So,
moving on.
Yeah.
Who was watching South Park last week?
Who didn't? Well, I don't know if anybody actually watches South Park anymore, but who didn't see what you're about to talk about?
Oh, my Lord. Donald Trump's White House is very upset about Wednesday's explosive South Park Season 27 premiere, which is interesting when it premiered after they made sure that they had signed their new deal for $1.5 billion to keep South Park on Paramount Plus. And so then they came out and they portrayed the president of these United States, as they say, begging for sex with Satan, and featured a deep fake assisted PSA where Trump, little Trump, has something to say, and you see him on the screen too. If you know what I'm referring to.
I just think that what do you think about this?
Well, first of all, they are irreverent, and everything they do is kind of off color to begin with.
It is very, yep.
Let me give you a quote from a White House spokesperson. The left's hypocrisy truly has no end. For years, they have come after South Park for what they labeled as offensive content, but suddenly they are praising the show, White House spokesperson Taylor Rogers said in a statement to Variety. The South Park premiere was entirely centered around Trump, suing those who speak out against him. In the episode, the town of South Park riles up a protest against the president.
It was a lot. Again, we want to hear from you. Yeah,
quickly of the creators. Trey Parker said, "We're terribly sorry about that," but it was followed by a long deadpan comic stare. So I don't know that you can trust he was really sorry about it.
Not sorry. We want to hear from you. Did you think the South Park episode was funny, or was that simply too far? Give us a call, 713-440-8870.
I didn't see it.
To me, it's less about, to be honest, the episode, and more about, I'm just not sure. I think our government should essentially care if there's a show making fun of them.
Satire.
It's satire.
And if you're in the public eye, anyone can say anything they want.
Exactly.
And all of that,
To me, I'm kind of like, come on, it's... Regardless of what they said, I personally did not see it. I'm not a big fan of South Park.
Yeah, I've never seen one.
It's not my
You've
cup
never
of...
seen an episode of South Park?
No, I watched a little of the Tom Cruise.
Wait, guys.
one. That was funny.
It's not my cup of tea.
Oh, aren't you so English?
Anyway, no, it's just not my cup of tea, really. And
well, I think the heat is coming off you for Back to the Future and Star Wars, and going over to Frank for never having seen an episode of South Park.
Frank, you've really never seen an episode of South Park?
I watched a little bit of the Tom Cruise one when they made fun of Tom Cruise and the Scientology, and that was kind of funny. But it's so snarky. It's just a snarky show.
It is, and I was pretty young when the South Park movie came out, and it got a lot of backlash, and so it's one of those things where I'm not sure our president should
But I've never been a cartoon person. I mean, like The Simpsons and Stewie and
Love
Family
The
Guy.
Simpsons.
And so when it's a cartoon, I'm like, eh.
Well, my feeling is at the end of the day, like going along with Celeste, it's a cartoon. You're the most powerful. You're in the most powerful position on the planet, and you care what these guys are doing as jokes and fodder at you. You know, I mean, that's how I feel about it. Was it disrespectful? Probably. Is it in line with
I'm
what
sure
they do
it
all
was
the time?
very-
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's my take on it. What is your take? 713-440-8870.
Coming up on Hello Houston, Dr. Jennifer Orme-Zavaleta of the Environmental Protection Network will break down the EPA changes under the Trump administration. We'll find out more next. This is News 88.7.
You can't tackle life's big challenges if you let the little ones get you down. That's why Houston Matters devotes the first Monday of each month to a sort of group moan session we call Houstonian Pet Peeves. It's a communal, cathartic experience, but not everyone can join us live at 9 a.m., and not every peeve occurs to you right then and there. That's okay. We welcome your gripes about life in Houston anytime at talk@houstonmatters.org.
I'm Stephen Dubner. On the next Freakonomics Radio, we speak with one of the smartest and most compelling people in contemporary theater.
David Adjmi is my name, and playwright is my game.
We talk about what it costs to lead a creative life these days.
There were times when I really thought I was losing my mind. It got really, really bad for me.
That's next time on Freakonomics Radio.
It's coming up tonight. You can hear that at 9 o'clock.
It's one thing to love public radio, but it's a special thing to support it. Consider this. If you've got a car you don't need anymore, or you've got one that's simply too expensive to repair, you can arrange to donate it to Houston Public Media. We take any kind of vehicle in any condition. It's easy for you, pickup is free, and it could be worth hundreds of dollars in support. Visit houstonpublicmedia.org/cars to learn more. And thanks.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Texas Mutual Insurance Company, a workers' compensation provider striving to build trust with businesses across the state through dedicated services. More at texasmutual.com/TexansDeliver. Support for Houston Public Media comes from listeners like you and from Houston Public Library Foundation, opening doors to discovery this summer through educational programs, books, and digital tools for everyone. More at HoustonLibraryFoundation.org.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on any of today's topics, call 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now back to Ernie Manous, Celeste Diaz-Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
The EPA is undergoing a major transformation. Under the Trump administration, its Scientific Research Office is being dismantled, part of a broader reorganization that critics say undermines the agency's ability to protect public health and the environment. With us to explain what's at stake is Dr. Jennifer Orme-Zavaleta, former acting assistant administrator of the EPA's Office of Research and Development. She now sits on the board of the Environmental Protection Network. Dr. Orme-Zavaleta, welcome to Hello Houston.
Hi, thank you for having me.
You know, we use the word dismantle. Can you give us details on what organizational changes are actually being made to the EPA and who is leading this effort?
Hi. Well, so the agency has a number of different offices that help it to implement the environmental statutes that Congress has passed. And when EPA was created, nearly 55 years ago, one of the offices that was established was the Office of Research and Development. And its role was really to provide scientific information to the program offices like the Water Office, the Air Office, the Chemicals Office, and so forth that are in Washington, and help provide that science to inform those large national kinds of decisions. There are regional offices. For example, in Texas, there's a regional office in Dallas. And ORD would also help to provide science for those regional offices with helping to implement some of the policy decisions. So it's been around a long time. It's had a very critical role in helping the agency achieve its mission.
Interesting.
Some of the arguments that come with these dismantling all across the government is that other organizations will pick up this work or localize it to certain offices, things like that. Do you see a plan to preserve any of this work in other areas of the government, or is it just going away?
Well, from my understanding, the changes that have been proposed by the administration is to take some of the staff in the research office and distribute them to the program offices. And then they would create a new science office that wouldn't be a standalone office. It would be housed under the administrator's office. What's not clear in this new office is what their role is going to be. Will they conduct research, or will they be there to just meet the requirements or needs of a program? For example, if the water office were to say, new science office, we would like you to prepare a method to measure this chemical in water. So kind of like a contract lab. And the expectation that others might be able to pick up the slack, keep in mind, the federal government for decades and decades has really been the driver for supporting science around the country. They would provide funds to universities, whether through EPA or through other kinds of grants, and partner with other private sector organizations, other federal agencies. But there seems to be a kind of a wholesale diminishing of resources that are going to be provided not only within the federal government, but from the federal government to outside organizations.
Do you expect this will have long-term ramifications as you talk about, the scaling these back, or can a pro-EPA president reverse these actions, in a few years?
Well, unfortunately, what's happening is we're losing a lot of staff. We're losing a lot of expertise, a lot of historical knowledge. So people that are leaving, some are retirement eligible, but some are leaving and looking for other jobs. There are some capabilities that will be lost, some types of experimental setups and research facilities. And that will take a very long time to try to replace and restore. So I think we will find ourselves at risk of not being able to meet certain needs. For example, one of the things that the research office, ORD, was able to do is when there was an unexpected event, a Hurricane Harvey, a Hurricane Katrina, a Deepwater Horizon, other kinds of unanticipated events, ORD was able to quickly mobilize expertise to be on the ground to help with recovery and restoration of the impacts of those events. Those kinds of things, one might think that they could quickly put in a contract to do that, but all of that administrative work takes time, and so the government could be less responsive in an emergency.
What do you think about the response to Hurricane Helene in North Carolina?
Well, certainly wasn't perfect, and this also happened as we had a transition of administrations. Helene was a big surprise in terms of the direction that it took, and the parts of Western North Carolina was just completely inundated. So I think FEMA got out there. I don't know the particulars, but FEMA got out there, but things, again, were not perfect. A lot of people were without communication. It was hard to find out who was where and how to reach them and be able to provide support that they needed right away. So it highlights that in this country, we still have vulnerabilities when we have events, and especially when people are caught off guard or by surprise.
Mm-hmm. Can you give us the nuts and bolts of your organization? It's being dismantled, but what does that mean in terms of budget and personnel and offices?
Sure. So the ORD had a budget of about $500 million and about 1,500 people. So that will be greatly reduced. And those resources, they use a different color of money than other parts of EPA. So the administration is going to have to work with Congress on how best to sort out how money is appropriated or allocated to the agency and what work they'll do. But the research that was done in ORD covered everything. It covered human health, it covered environmental impacts, it looked at air quality, water quality, the safety of chemicals, the safety of communities. There was a Homeland Security research program. So those programs per se look to be going away. And it's unclear how that will be covered, if at all, with the proposed changes.
Are there any near-term concerns that Texans should be aware of and that we should be looking at as we look at how this is the change of the EPA is happening?
And one of the things that ORD had a responsibility for was they were a voice for EPA's, what we called EPA's laboratory enterprise. So in addition to the ORD laboratories, the regional offices, like the one in Dallas, also had a regional laboratory, and that regional laboratory happens to be located in Houston. So ORD was appointed under the Trump 1 administration by Administrator Wheeler to be what's called a national program manager. And largely what that meant was we would look at the big picture across the agency and across the country, and to make sure that people had the right equipment to do analyses and that we were all working together and coordinating. And one of the examples was there are contaminants like PFAS, which hopefully you've heard about. These are the perfluorinated compounds that are pretty ubiquitous in the environment. And we set up a great coordinated effort across all of the different laboratories so that environmental samples could be measured by a number of different groups to help provide communities answers to questions of what kinds of contaminants they might have in their water, in their fish, in their soil.
Let me take you a step back again in trying to understand what is actually going on here, or what you think the motivation is behind it. It's easy to say that it's cost-cutting measures, and that's why they want to do these things. They want to save money, they want to reduce staff, things like that. Do you see from where you sit alternate reasons they would want to take this approach? And the second question mixed in here somewhere is, if you were given, I often say it's the keys to the kingdom, would there have been a way to reduce costs that would not have affected output or influence?
Yeah, so it's interesting because under Trump 1, we worked closely with the administration on reorganizing the research office so that it would have greater impact and provide greater support to the agency's programs. We reduced some of the management overhead so that for the positions that we were allowed to have, we could really maximize the number of scientists that we had. We worked on building communities of practice of that science so that the research done in one office would benefit more than one program office. So, for example, the PFAS research I mentioned, it would support the needs of the water program, the chemical program, Superfund, and the air office. I think we're going to lose that efficiency with these types of changes. We understand that every administration is looking to increase efficiency and increase their impact, but I feel like these changes aren't going to achieve the goals that the administration is looking for. And if anything, it may lead to less coordinated, more siloed approach. It's also unclear really how much research is actually going to be done versus providing just technical expertise for the agency in whether to develop a rule, a regulation, or decide that an existing regulation maybe needs to come away. So I think it's really unclear at this point.
You're listening to Hello Houston. We are speaking with Dr. Jennifer Orme-Zavaleta, the former acting assistant administrator of the EPA's Office of Research and Development. You can join the conversation if you have a question at 713-440-8870.
So, ma'am, where do you see this going? What if you could put a crystal ball on it a year from now? Where will we be with all of this?
Well, I think part of what we're seeing in some ways is kind of a wholesale change in the role of government. And I think that we're seeing less taking place in the federal government and with the federal community, and more responsibility perhaps being placed with states or other groups. The challenge there is that states don't have the capability or capacity really to pick up a lot of the work, especially the research work that ORD does. And so that could complicate things and make things more difficult for communities in understanding what they're exposed to and what the potential risks might be. And then more importantly, how do you get this stuff cleaned up out of your environment? So I think that that's one challenge. I think there's been an interest perhaps in the administration for the science to have a few more guardrails around it. ORD was an independent standalone organization. It did have a Senate-confirmed assistant administrator overseeing it, and that's happened in most administrations. The Trump 1 administration was not able to have a Senate-confirmed nominee. And so, but usually there is some political oversight, but I think there's an interest now in having the leaders of the different programs, like the water program or the air program, have a little more direct control over what science is done, how it's interpreted, and how it's used.
So when a community, like I know the one I think it was Flint, Michigan, comes down with bad water, undrinkable water, is it the EPA that comes to the rescue on the white horses?
So EPA, I don't think was completely on the white horse as a whole. ORD, I felt, was more on the white horse because the ORD scientists and engineers came in and looked at how to solve the problem. They looked at how to understanding the water treatment options, the fact that the change in source water complicated the issues at Flint, Michigan. And so they worked closely with the community to solve the problem, to improve and optimize water treatment so that it would reduce lead coming out of the taps, and eventually leading to the conclusion that they had to replace their lead service lines in order to provide safe drinking water to the community.
And that group may not be there, or maybe cut back to the point where Michigan would have to do it on its own.
And that's exactly the concern. Yeah. That's exactly the concern.
So that is a big concern, I would think. Are there people like yourself or others who are lobbying for this to not happen, or is this just a done deal?
Well, it's not a complete done deal. There's a lot of things. So technically, when the administration wants to make a big change like this, they're to submit paperwork to Congress, and Congress either gives approval or doesn't give approval. So there's been a lot of conversations with, not only communities like yours, but talking to staffers on the Hill, members on the Hill, talking to the media, trying to help people understand what the benefits of ORD are and what the risks are of not having that kind of an organization. So that if the government decides to move ahead with this, they're going to know what's at risk and what will be the benefits, and they can make a better informed decision.
We're talking to Dr. Jennifer Orme-Zavaleta, former acting assistant administrator of the EPA's Office of Research and Development, now sitting on the board of the Environmental Protection Network. If you'd like to have a question for us, 713-440-8870. So if we go through that kind of an issue, let's say we have a big hurricane here, and we don't know when our drinking water is going to be safe. Does ORD come in and help us make that determination?
ORD will be one of many that come in and help make that determination. And so one example for Houston with Hurricane Harvey and the storm surge and the impact on water treatment for the community, ORD came in and developed what was called a water on wheels cart, which was basically a mobile unit that would come in and help treat contaminated water so that it could be used for drinking and other purposes. And so that was a really innovative problem-solving approach that we were able to bring in to help Houston during the time, because it took a while for Houston to recover from Harvey.
This question, you've kind of sort of answered a little bit, but let me bring it to you anyway. It was a text that we got in. It came in from Jen in Clear Lake. Are there any nonprofits who can absorb some of the people and functions being lost? Some folks would like to help if we can, even if politicians are unhelpful.
Well, so of course, if part of the nonprofits, it takes money. And so if they are able to hire and bring in expertise, one of the things that the Environmental Protection Network, along with the EPA Alumni Association, has been doing is posting job opportunities on our websites. So for those employees who are finding themselves without a job at the government, if they're interested, they will know kind of what's available and where to look.
What do you see this locally going? I mean, if we have another Hurricane Harvey and we don't have ORD, is it going to be state? Is it going to be local? Who are we going to turn to?
So it will be state, it will be local, there will be a regional office, and there will be people there. It's just the type of response and the speed of that response, could be impacted. Just as we saw with the flooding in Central Texas, there was a diminished federal presence there in helping that community and trying to find people that were lost and try to get things back up and running as the floodwaters receded. So I think that those are good wake-up calls of the kind of challenges we might be facing with a diminished federal presence.
Dr. Jennifer Orme-Zavaleta is the former acting assistant administrator of the EPA's Office of Research and Development. She now sits on the board of the Environmental Protection Network. Dr. Orme-Zavaleta, thank you so much for joining us on Hello Houston.
All right. Thank you very much for having me.
Yep. Good luck.
Thank you.
Coming up, we'll learn about a local mobile library. Stay with us as Hello Houston continues.
I'm Josh Adams, the new general manager of Houston Public Media, and we are here for one reason: you. I'm thrilled to lead this remarkable team dedicated to our mission of informing, educating, and inspiring everyone in the greater Houston area. And yes, these are challenging times, but together we'll meet them head on with bold ideas, honest reporting, and stories that matter. Houston Public Media is your public media. Together, let's make it incredible.
Dr. Tom Oxley is leading the pack of technologists racing to make devices that go inside our brains.
You're able to directly manipulate a mouse or a keyboard by thinking about trying to move, almost like a Bluetooth mouse controlled out of the brain.
Hear from the prophets of technology in a special series that's next time on the TED Radio Hour from NPR.
You can hear that tomorrow night. It's on at 9 o'clock.
With federal support gone, Houston Public Media needs a stronger foundation for the future.
The Houston Public Media Resiliency Fund is our response, a way to ensure this service remains strong, stable, and community-powered.
Call 888-909-0887. Your gift today helps us stay on the air tomorrow and the day after that.
Give now to the Resiliency Fund at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 888-909-0887.
Houston Public Media brings to you PBS World. Experience the personal connection behind the headlines with programming devoted to telling stories that humanize complex issues. PBS World on TV 8.6 and online at houstonpublicmedia.org. Tonight on Houston Public Media TV 8, Ken Burns explores one of the most prominent and influential families in American politics. The documentary series, The Roosevelts, continues tonight at 9 on TV 8 or stream on the PBS app.
And now back to Hello Houston. Call 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org to get your comment in on today's topics. Now back to Ernie Manous, Celeste Diaz-Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
Collab-Lab. I love good branding. Collab-Lab is a mobile classroom initiative by Houston area nonprofit Collaborative for Children that brings high-quality early childhood education directly to families at no cost. It's designed for children ages 3 to 5. The classroom is on wheels, and it helps build school readiness skills by focusing on STEAM, meaning science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, and social emotional development. So joining us now to tell us more about the mobile classroom is Militza Mezquita, the Texas State Director for Save the Children. Wow, that's a powerful logo. Save the children. Militza, welcome back to Hello Houston. Tell us, what is this all about?
Thank you. Yes. As we know, we are in month 2.5-ish, 3 of kids being at home and not having opportunities to learn. And so we partnered with a local organization called Collab-Lab for Children to get kids on a mobile unit to learn, especially our 0 to 5 kids who are at home, don't have access to childcare. Giving them an hour, 45 minutes just to get on a mobile unit and learn, play, and develop time with their parents. It's also a 2-generational approach, so parents get on there as well and play and interact with their kid while learning.
So how does this all work? So tell me how do you go into a neighborhood? How do you identify that neighborhood? And how many can you reach in, say, one day?
Sure. So last week we were at Rosenberg Library in Galveston, and we had hundreds of families come out, and they each take turns on the mobile unit for about 30 minutes to an hour, however long kids want to be on there. And we just promote throughout the community, especially our libraries, and we get families just to come out and really, really engage in those activities. So kids are, again, interacting. They're meeting social emotional learning. They're developing literacy, numeracy.
Explain what you mean by mobile units.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because when I first started thinking about this, the first thing that came to mind was like old bookmobiles that came into neighborhoods. I'm thinking I may be a little dated in my approach.
Sure. So Collab-Lab for Children took an old school bus and jacked it out. So you're talking state-of-the-art literacy and math. There's a robot on there that interacts with the kids. So yes, it's a state-of-the-art, fully renovated bus that meets every kid's needs in terms of opportunities to learn. There's science on there. There's water tables so they can get wet and play. There's art activities. But yes, it's not like the old school book libraries. It's completely renovated so that it meets kids' technological needs from today.
And Militza, when we are looking at this age group, 0 to 5, can you talk to us about what social emotional skills look like for that age group? I think that's so interesting.
Sure. It's about being able to regulate their emotions. So when they go to kindergarten, they're ready to sit for their teacher. It's the ability to be a good classmate to their friends and learning how to share. It's about learning sort of what is socially acceptable and appropriate and being able to tap into their executive function skills that they will use later on in life when they're ready to enter the workforce.
Is it a one and done, or do you go back to the neighborhoods?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a rotating schedule that we've partnered with Collab-Lab. Over the summer, we focused on rural parts of Houston. So everyone thinks Houston is this big, urban area, but there are rural pockets where those kids get little to no resources and services. So Rosenberg Library in Galveston on the island, we were out there last week really focusing on those kids that have less services than other kids.
So help me understand this part of it, because often I hear about these kind of programs and I think, well, what kind of net impact can they truly have on a child? It seems like, oh, that's kind of cool to do for an hour and a half here. And that's all it is. It's like a midday activity that happens once. What is the idea behind the concept of continuing education during summer months, and how does it actually impact a student?
Sure. So I think what sometimes we forget is whether you're learning for 30 minutes or an hour, kids 0 to 5, their brains are still developing, so that takes them very far. Versus us, if we sat on there for 30 minutes, we'd forget about it. But those are the building blocks that over time just wire their neurons to have that enrichment, and it'll take them very far. So sometimes as parents, we think, 30 minutes is not worth the investment or time to drive out, but really, it's part of those building blocks for when those kids are getting
so
older.
A small impact has long.
And so when you look at a child who is exposed to these type of programs versus a child who isn't exposed to these type of programs, what do you find in their success rates when they actually begin school?
Sure. So what we have found at Save the Children through our 100 years of being here in the U.S. and our research is we know that education is a ladder out of poverty. And so the more interventions we have, the more successful these kids will be later on in life, less impoverished, more resourced, less incarceration rates. And so we just want to make sure that we're building those foundations early on.
About how many kids do you service?
Yeah, over the summer so far, we've hit probably close to, I think, over 500 kids alone. So if you add their families, probably 1.5 times that. So a good group of folks, again, focusing on those rural pockets of Houston where they have no resources.
Where do you get your development?
Yeah. Great. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Great
Who
question.
gives you the money?
Yeah. So us partnering with Collab-Lab, Save the Children, we are funded through a cadre of resources, philanthropic and state funding.
Now more than ever, especially with the cutting of funding to PBS, not so much in our market, but across the country, having other resources for children that may have gotten their home education from watching educational children's programming. But I'm curious the nuts and bolts a little bit about what happens. So I'm a family here, and I've got my 2 youngins, and we hear you're coming into our community. What do we have to do? How do we plan this out, and what happens in the process?
Sure. So you just hop in your car, whatever that address is, come find us. And really, it's easy. We just write down your information. Again, it's all privatized. It's de-identified for safety and security reasons. And once you check in, you get time on the mobile unit.
Do I stay with my children?
Yes,
Do you folks?
yes, we do ask parents to stay with their children because it is an opportunity for parents to interact with their children. And so we want that dual generation learning and that approach. And then once you come off the bus, there is a I Wonder curriculum that is supplemented that parents get to take home. And it is how to continue the learnings at home.
And that's, something I was going to ask you, Militza, is that we often talk about these impacts that this has on a child, but talk to us about the impact that it has on a parent and the resources that you're providing. Like you said, they get to go home. And I love that it's free because these types of things are expensive.
Sure. Yes. We know education is very expensive. And so one of the things about getting the free opportunity and the free curriculum is parents can tap into it at home. And again, it's really leveling out the equity and equality that every child deserves a chance at education and a fair education. And so really being able to provide that curriculum at home, we've seen a lot of parents coming back saying, hey, for dinner time, we did this intervention or we did this practice, and really being able to tap into that.
Do you tend to show up in a place and are there for a day and then next week come back and a week after, or is it a one and done?
We try to circle back wherever the needs are. We really partner with our, Discovery Green has us out quite frequently. And again, our partner Collaborative for Children's been really great about identifying those key places to be across Houston.
Is there an online presence? So like if you're hearing this right now, but first of all, you want to know where it's going to be so you can go to it. Or if you can't go to it, but you can engage in some of you're talking about the after programs. I'm wondering if you can't even make it. Is there a place?
Yeah, absolutely. Collab4children.org is our partner's website, and they have the full menu list of where they're going to be next and what resources are available to kids across Houston 0 to 5.
And is there an online presence that you can get engaged with without coming out to the vehicle?
At this point, no, because we want people to come out and be in person. Less online time with the kids is better.
Less free time. Which I was going to ask you, as we're getting ready to kind of wrap up the summer months, what do you guys have coming up moving into the fall?
Absolutely. So for Save the Children, we just launched our back to school training. We got 80 teachers in a classroom to train them on early literacy interventions. And so we will be programming our literacy program at 15 schools in the San Antonio area, but we're looking to bring it to the Houston area.
When we talk about early literacy, when does that start? Because kids don't really start learning how to read until they're 4 or 5. But what is the importance for parents to start at a very early age?
Absolutely. So again, when they're babies, singing to them, reading to them, that all starts wiring in their brain, and it develops those skills early on. So when they do enter kindergarten, they are ahead of the game, that they know and they can identify with what their teacher is starting to teach them.
Wow.
And, yeah, that's amazing. And what if people want to know more about the programs coming up and the different things that you all have going, where can people head to?
Absolutely. SaveChildren.org. We're the Texas team, and we provide really across the entire state our early literacy intervention programs. And we also have our math programming that is phenomenal for kids because that's going to launch them really far.
So what are you most proud about of your organization?
I think I'm most proud that we reach children that are less resourced and more marginalized, and we're able to provide an equitable foundation so that they can thrive in life.
Nice.
Militza Mezquita is the Texas State Director for Save the Children. Militza, thank you for joining us today on Hello Houston.
Thank you.
Yeah, keep up the good work.
And earlier we were talking a little bit about, it's nice to be back. And
Yes.
before we wrap up.
Okay, quick question for you all. You can play if you'd like.
He didn't get out of the studio
You didn't get out of the
enough.
studio fast enough.
Okay,
You're
I
here
was
with
just
us.
in Montreal.
Okay.
How many miles do you think Montreal has for beautiful, well-maintained bike lanes? The city of Montreal, how many miles of bike lanes?
0.
I'm going to go with 50.
100.
652 miles of beautiful, safe, well-maintained bike lanes. They all obey the laws. The traffic lights have bikes on them. So when
Yeah.
it says red bike, you don't go. Green bike, you go. Houston, if you want to do something about bike lanes, go to Montreal and study it.
Oh, that's right. Well, that brings us to the end of our show. We want to thank you for listening, engaging, and chatting with us today on Hello Houston. It is fabulous to be back, and we will be back tomorrow with more conversations. This is News 88.7. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for listening to Hello Houston. Join us every Monday through Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. to talk all things Houston. The Hello Houston production team includes Garrett Bowman, William Menjivar, Jen Altide, Todd Holslander, and Jim Kovacic. For the latest in local news, subscribe to the Hello Houston daily newsletter at houstonpublicmedia.org. Hello Houston is a production of Houston Public Media. The opinions expressed by the guests of this program are solely their own and do not represent the views of management, staff, or underwriters of Houston Public Media. This is News 88.7.
Support comes from the Eternal Gandhi Museum Houston, highlighting the power of nonviolent conflict resolution through examples of peace leaders worldwide. Now open. Field trips and